Hey there, everybody. Reed here, conductor at Orchestra Farm, coming to you on this beautiful, semi-rainy, on and off day. Today I wanted to chat with you kind of about life, kind of about trauma, share with you a mythology that I hold. Some things are mythologies because it's really difficult to show their realism. But here we go. All of life, from what I see, is connected in a golden braided rope, where each life is a thread upon that braid, and some of the braids, your species, is a thick portion that's braided together with all the other species to create this beautiful braid of life. And that golden thread comes straight down through our being. I've heard it referred to in some yoga readings I read, where you can just keep yourself perfectly upright and that golden thread is in perfect alignment rather than being wiggled about or knotted. Those knots that happen are the traumas in our life. It seems like basically no matter where you grew up or what your circumstances were, something happened and it didn't sit quite well with you, and if you weren't able to actually process through it, then it got tied up in your system as a form of a trauma. And then hopefully later on in life you get to deal with that and realize that the way that you chose to respond to things from your childhood or adolescence is not necessarily the ideal ways to respond to things, and you continue to grow as an adult. Oh, look at all those wasps over there. And choose different action sequences that have healthier relationship dynamics to them. And as we do that, if we take on the work of dealing with our traumas, dealing with our past histories, then part of what takes place is that, I'm seeing all these seeds over here, that's exciting. We slowly unknot that golden thread. And what does that kind of mean? Well, one thing is that as we unknot that golden thread, if we still ourselves enough and we listen in closely, we may experience memories that come forward. We may experience sensations move through our bodies into different places. And if we are able to be present with that, we'll actually follow that thread down and smooth it right out again, relieving those different traumas. Now, this obviously, depending on your life story and circumstances, can take your whole life to deal with, and is at times an arduous process. As those different memories come forward, we might easily not want to remember those different moments. We might not enjoy the feelings that are happening in the body during that time, and so we might stop the process in mid-motion. Our ability to breathe with all of this, to allow our breath, full and graceful, to move with those moments of energy and allow the transformation to take place, something I see as crucial. And in life, I often hear the word triggered these days. To me, that really just means that one is holding a trauma, and whatever is being brought forward is bringing that trauma to that person's surface, and they don't wish to deal with it at that time, which is both perfectly fair and is an obvious space of like, hey, we both individually and collectively could really use to work on this, so that way we can be responding from the place of the actual moment rather than some past traumatic moment. And this comes up oftentimes in relationships, especially intimate ones. And that notion that when we're in an intimate relationship, we allow ourselves to be a bit more vulnerable than just in our casual relationships at a coffee shop. And when our partner triggers us, it's really just saying that they've brought forward a piece of my personal trauma to have a moment to be resolved Like the notion of forgiveness. There's forgiveness and forgetting. Forgiveness is not for whatever incident or individual may have caused us harm or created the trauma in the first place. Forgiveness is for ourselves, for holding that knot in this golden thread in place and not allowing it to be taken out, smoothed. Forgetting is what happens when a true apology mixed with the actions of apology happen, and then you can reasonably say, like, I am now in a state of trust again with this individual. It's often not really wise to both forgive and forget, because most of the time we don't get that piece of the apology and the actual action sequences to need us to forget. In fact, it's important to remember so that way we don't allow whatever happened in the past to happen again. There's a lot of truth and reconciliation stuff happening here in Canada. I give basic applause to that. At the same time, living here in British Columbia on unceded lands, what does that mean? Well, it means these lands were stolen. How can I take ownership of a land that was stolen from someone else? Couldn't, for lack of a better term, the police come and take back that piece of stolen property and return it to the individuals it is the rightful owner of? The answer ought to be a yes. At the same time, how the heck is life supposed to function on the planet when you look across the whole spectrum of things, you can see that the majority of time, land, as far as people's relationship to it, has been stolen from other people and or beings. Like as you look at the desertification process happening across our beautiful globe, that we are robbing all these other species of their habitats. All these other life forms that cohabitate with us are losing their habitation. Don't they have a natural right to be embodied on the planet in their localized ecosystems? I think so. It raises interesting notions of, like, as we are, let's see if I can get this right, eco-psychosocial systems, meaning that we are psychically connected to the ecologies that we live with in a social network, because we are not simply just individuals. We actually exist as a social creature, and that is a system of being, because what happens here affects what happens in other places. And how do we recognize the past traumas of any given place linked with all the other places, and recognize that some of that stuff is moving through our bodies if we are beings who are soft and listening enough to feel them? Now, not everyone does that, and that's okay. We all have different abilities with our senses, but you recognize that for those of us who do feel that, there is a call to change how we live, to change how we relate to landscapes, to allow space for grief and for forgiveness to come through, because it does seem like our cells carry ancestral knowledge, ancestral wisdom. Our bones hold rituals of the past, even though many of my ancestors were either destroyed early on before words of genocide came through, before words of assimilation were prevalent in the lexicon, and a lot of the rituals to their landscapes were seemingly lost to the threads of time. But with quantum physics showing us different things about time, with our own ability to perceive time when we recognize that we're more than these physical bodies, we can actually work with that and take this golden thread of lineage that comes through all of life and help to remove those past traumatic moments, those knots in the cord, so that we can breathe with that whole being of self. I told you this was semi-mythological today. Anyway, I put that forward as a notion of, like, explore where your own personal triggers are, your own traumas. How can you breathe with and through them to relieve the tensions held in your body? Tensions are a form of stress. Stress creates death. Not that I'm afraid of death. I think I've mentioned that already. I'll go into it later in another one. But let's live as much as possible let's recognize that there are dangers in life, that there are needs to do things that might cause us harm. Like, I don't want to avoid all potentially harmful experiences, because then I won't be living my full self. Mind you, I take a lot less risks than some people out there, but you got to be able to assess it. If I'm going to like risk breaking my head open, well, that's a different risk than breaking my arm. It can heal. These things are okay. It doesn't have to always be the most traumatic thing. And just because some traumatic thing might appear to be happening for somebody else, maybe they're not receiving it that way. Maybe it's the ideas of other people witnessing it that causes it to be traumatic. I look at my children as they learn to walk and then they fall down. It could either be a very traumatic thing, falling down, or they just get back up and do it again, because I'm like, you got this. You're good. Let's go forward. And remember the strength of character that we all naturally have. And having a nurturing sense still there, but that nurturing doesn't have to be helicopter parent type, where you just never let your kid do anything, or yourself do anything that might cause you some harm. And at the same time, recognize that when harm is caused, allow there to be an apology. Allow that apology to be felt through actions. And let's all collectively work to take out the knots that are clearly visible in our collective and individual threads of life. With that, have too much fun! Can you believe it? Yeah, it's totally possible. Thanks for liking and subscribing to the page. Super appreciate all the comments out there. If you got a comment about this, like maybe this triggered you, maybe it brought forward some past trauma in your own self, I'm curious to hear about all that. Let me know.